In the winter of 1344, in a starving village in Anhui province, a 16-year-old boy buried his parents and his older brother within 3 weeks of each other. Plague, famine, and a collapsing empire had taken almost everything he had. He didn't own land to bury them on. He had to beg a neighbor for a scrap of ground. That boy's name was Zhu Yuanzhang. 24 years later, he would rule the largest, richest empire on earth. And the palace he built to prove it would be so vast, so tightly guarded, that ordinary people would spend the next 5 centuries calling it something else entirely: the Forbidden City. This is the story of the Ming Dynasty. 276 years, 16 emperors, an empire that went from a starving monk's begging bowl to the most sophisticated bureaucracy on the planet, and then, slowly, catastrophically, tore itself apart from the inside. Let's start with how bad things actually were. By the 1340s, the Mongol-ruled Yuan Dynasty, the one Genghis Khan's grandson Kublai Khan had founded a century earlier, was falling apart. Corruption was endemic. Floods kept breaking the Yellow River's banks. Then came the plague. Zhu Yuanzhang's family were tenant farmers, among the poorest people in an already poor province. When his parents and brother died in that famine, he had nowhere to go, so he did what desperate young men did in that era. He shaved his head and entered a Buddhist monastery. It didn't last. Within months, the monastery itself ran out of food, and the monks were sent out to beg. For roughly 3 years, Zhu Yuanzhang wandered central China as an itinerant beggar monk, sleeping in temples, fields, and doorways, watching an empire collapse from the very bottom of it. That's the first thing worth clearing up, because the popular version skips it entirely. Zhu Yuanzhang didn't rise to power as a general or a nobleman. He rose from literally nothing, and it took a millenarian religious rebellion to give him his opening. In 1352, at 24, he joined the Red Turbans, a rebel movement built around Buddhist prophecy and hatred of Mongol rule. He proved to be a natural soldier and an even better politician. Within a decade, he had absorbed his own commander's forces and built an army answering to no one but him. His biggest rival for control of southern China was a warlord named Chen Yuliang, who commanded a navy of enormous multi-decked war junks. In 1363, the two fleets collided on Lake Poyang in what became one of the largest naval battles in recorded history. Zhu Yuanzhang's smaller, faster ships used fire and won. 4 years later, he crushed his last major rival, a merchant warlord named Zhang Xichang, and took the wealthy city of Suzhou. There was no one left to stop him. In 1368, the beggar monk declared a new dynasty. He named it Ming, meaning bright, and took the era name Hongwu, vastly martial. That same year, Ming forces marched into the Yuan capital. The Mongol court fled north into the steppe they'd come from a century earlier. For the first time in nearly 100 years, China was ruled by a native Chinese dynasty again. And it was ruled by a man who had once begged for rice. Here's where the story gets darker. You'd expect a man who clawed his way up from nothing to build a government of trust. Hongwu built the opposite. He never forgot poverty, and he never trusted anyone who hadn't shared it with him. In 1380, he accused his own chancellor, Hongwu Emperor, of plotting treason. He had him executed. Then he kept going. Over the following years, the investigation metastasized into a purge that killed an estimated 30,000 people, officials, their families, their associates, anyone with the wrong connections. Then Hongwu did something no Chinese emperor had done in over 1,000 years. He simply abolished the position of chancellor altogether. No single official would ever again stand between the emperor and total control of the state. From now on, the emperor did the job of prime minister himself. To watch everyone else, he created the Jinyue, the embroidered uniform guard, an imperial secret police answerable only to him. They could arrest, interrogate, and execute without going through the normal courts. For the first time, the Ming court had an internal surveillance apparatus built directly into the throne. He wasn't done purging. In 1393, he turned on his own generals, accusing the decorated commander Lan Yu of plotting a coup. The Lan Yu case killed another 15,000 people, wiping out nearly an entire generation of the Ming military's senior leadership in one sweep. By the time Hongwu was finished, 2 purges alone had killed more people than most dynasties executed in a century. He wasn't just removing rivals, he was making sure no institution in the empire, not the chancellery, not the army, could ever grow powerful enough to threaten the throne again. To be fair to him, and this is the part that gets lost, Hongwu was also genuinely rebuilding the country. He restored the civil examination system. He redistributed abandoned farmland to peasants. He cut taxes in devastated regions. The population, which had collapsed under Mongol misrule, began recovering fast. He also reached deeper into ordinary life than any dynasty before him. Every household was registered into the Ligia system, groups of 100 families collectively responsible for their own taxes, labor duties, and local order, recorded in what were called the Yellow Registers. The state now had a paper trail running into every village in the empire. One person had always been able to talk him down. His wife, Empress Ma, a former commander's daughter who had shared his years of hardship before the throne, was known for quietly softening his worst impulses, pleading for mercy for officials he wanted dead. She died in 1382, 2 years after the first Hongwu Emperor purge began. The Lan Yu case came 11 years later, with no one left in the palace willing to tell him to stop. He ruled for 30 years and left an empire stronger than the one he'd inherited from chaos. He also left something else behind, a precedent. That paranoia, purges, and total centralized control were simply how Ming emperors governed. His successors would inherit that instinct along with the throne. When Hongwu died in 1398, the throne should have gone to his son, but his chosen heir had died 6 years earlier. So the crown passed instead to a 21-year-old grandson, Zhu Yuanzhang, the Yongle Emperor. And Jianwen had a problem his grandfather had personally created. Hongwu had made dozens of his own sons regional princes, each with real armies stationed along the frontiers to guard against Mongol raids. It made sense while he was alive to control them. To his young grandson, it looked like an empire full of loaded guns pointed at the throne. Jianwen was in many ways the opposite of his grandfather. Where Hongwu had ruled through fear and purges, Jianwen surrounded himself with Confucian scholar officials and tried to soften the harshest of Hongwu's laws. It was a promising start. It also meant he had almost no personal military experience of his own when the real test came. On the advice of his closest ministers, he began stripping his uncles of their titles and armies one by one. It was meant to secure the throne. Instead, it told every remaining prince exactly what was coming for them next. One uncle wasn't going to wait his turn. Zhu Di, Prince of Yan, commanded the toughest, most battle-tested troops in the empire from his base at Beiping, the future Beijing. In 1399, he raised his army under the banner of clearing away the emperor's evil advisors. Everyone understood what that actually meant. 3 years of brutal civil war followed. It's called the Jingnan Campaign, and it was uncle against nephew, prince against emperor, fought with the very institutions Hongwu had built specifically to prevent this exact scenario. In 1402, Zhu Di's forces broke through and took the capital, Nanjing. The palace caught fire. And when the smoke cleared, Emperor Jianwen was simply gone. His body, officials claimed, had been found among the ashes. Nobody was entirely convinced. Here's the mystery. No one could confirm the corpse was actually Jianwen's. For decades afterward, rumors persisted that the young emperor had escaped disguised as a monk, the very disguise his grandfather had once worn as a beggar, and lived out his life in hiding, somewhere south of the empire he'd lost. It didn't matter to Zhu Di. He declared himself emperor, took the era name Yongle, meaning perpetual happiness, and set about erasing every trace of his nephew's 4-year reign from the official histories. Records were rewritten. A reign struck from the calendar. And here's where the paradox comes in, because the man who took the throne through fire and civil war became the emperor who built China's most enduring golden age. Yongle moved the capital north to his old power base, Beiping. He renamed it Beijing, northern capital, and he began building something the world had never seen. Construction began in 1406. It took over 1 million workers and roughly 14 years. When it was finished in 1420, the Forbidden City covered 180 acres, nearly 1,000 buildings, almost 9,000 rooms according to court tradition, though the real number is closer to 8,700. Every gate, every wall, every roof color followed strict cosmological rules. Only the emperor could use certain shades of yellow. The whole complex was laid out on a north-south axis, meant to align the emperor with the pole star itself, the fixed point the entire universe supposedly rotated around. Yongle's ambitions didn't stop at his own capital. In 1405, he launched the first of 7 massive naval expeditions under a Muslim eunuch admiral named Zheng He. The largest of his treasure ships reportedly stretched over 120 meters, roughly 5 times the length of the ships Columbus would sail 80 years later. Put that in perspective. When Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic in 1492, his flagship, the Santa Maria, was maybe 20 meters long and carried a crew of around 40. Zheng He's largest ships carried crews numbering in the hundreds, and his fleet sailed with dozens of vessels at once. This wasn't exploration. This was a floating empire. The voyages weren't peaceful sightseeing either. In 1407, Zheng He's fleet fought and captured a pirate warlord named Chen Zuyi, who had been terrorizing the Strait of Malacca, dragging him back to China in chains and executing him publicly as a warning to every port along the route. 3 years later, the fleet intervened directly in a succession dispute on the island of Ceylon, capturing a hostile local ruler named Alagakonara, who had attacked Zheng He's men, and shipping him back to the Ming court as a prisoner, before installing a more cooperative king in his place. By the later voyages, Zheng He's fleets had reached the Arabian Peninsula and the coast of East Africa, trading through Malindi and Mogadishu. In 1414, a giraffe arrived at the Ming court as a diplomatic gift, and officials, delighted, declared it a Kalin, the mythical unicorn said to appear only when a wise ruler governed the earth. Yongle also commissioned something almost as ambitious as the fleets themselves: the Yongle Encyclopedia, over 11,000 handwritten volumes, containing essentially every significant text that existed in Chinese civilization up to that point. It would remain the largest encyclopedia on Earth for the next 600 years. He wasn't finished. Yongle personally led 5 separate military campaigns deep into the Mongolian steppe, at times marching his armies across hundreds of kilometers of open desert to permanently neutralize the threat his own dynasty had displaced decades earlier. He died in 1424 in his own military tent on the way back from the 5th of those campaigns. He never stopped fighting. It's a strange thing to say about a man who also built the most magnificent palace complex on the planet, but Yongle spent his entire reign at war with somebody. His son and grandson, the Hongwu and Yongle Emperors, kept the golden age going for another decade. Yongle-era porcelain, in particular, is still considered some of the finest blue and white ware ever produced in China. This was, by almost any measure, the high point of Ming civilization. Then, quietly, without much fanfare, it all stopped. Zheng He sailed one final voyage under the Yongle Emperor and died on the journey home in 1433. After that, the great expeditions simply ended. Ships were left to rot in harbor. Records of the voyages were later destroyed by officials who considered them a wasteful vanity project. Think about that for a second. China had, at that moment, the most advanced navy that had ever existed on planet Earth, and it chose to walk away from it less than a century before European ships would start showing up on the other side of the world with an entirely different agenda. The next major crisis arrived under Yongle's great-grandson, Emperor Zhengtong, who took the throne as a child and grew up almost entirely under the influence of a single eunuch named Wang Zhen. And in 1449, Wang Zhen convinced the young emperor to do something catastrophically stupid. Personally, lead an army against the Oirat Mongols, who were raiding the frontier under a chieftain named Essen. Zhengtong marched north with a force some contemporary accounts put in the hundreds of thousands. It was disorganized, badly supplied, and commanded by a court eunuch with no real military experience. At a fortress called Tumu, Esen's cavalry surrounded the exhausted Ming army and destroyed it. This is one of the most humiliating military disasters in Chinese imperial history. And it got worse, because the Mongols didn't just defeat the emperor's army, they captured the emperor himself. For the first time in the dynasty's history, a reigning Ming emperor was a prisoner of a foreign power. Back in Beijing, the court panicked, then acted. They installed his half-brother as the new emperor, the Yongle Emperor, refusing to let Esen use Zhengtong as leverage. A minister named Yu Qian organized Beijing's defense with such competence that when Esen's army arrived at the walls expecting an easy ransom, they found a fortified capital ready to fight. The siege failed. Esen, with a captured emperor he could no longer profitably use, eventually released Zhengtong the following year. But coming home didn't mean coming back to power. His own brother kept him under house arrest inside the palace for the next 7 years, a former son of heaven locked inside the walls of his own capital. Then in 1457, while the Yongle Emperor lay dying without a clear heir, a group of officials staged a palace coup. They broke Zhengtong out of confinement in the middle of the night and put him back on the throne under a new era name, Tianshun. He is one of the only Chinese emperors in history to reign twice. His first act back in power tells you everything about how Ming court politics actually worked. He had Yu Qian, the general who had saved Beijing and, by extension, the dynasty itself, executed on fabricated treason charges. Loyalty to the wrong emperor, even temporarily, could still get you killed. The following decades saw the throne pass through a string of emperors more interested in personal amusement than governance. The Hongwu Emperor became infatuated with a concubine 2 decades his senior. The Zheng He Emperor built himself a private compound called the Leopard Quarter and staged mock battles for entertainment, delegating real power to a corrupt eunuch named Liu Jin. When Liu Jin was finally arrested and executed in 1510, investigators found a personal fortune in his private vaults that reportedly exceeded the entire imperial treasury. That's the level of corruption a distracted throne allowed to flourish, decade after decade. Zheng He died without an heir, and the throne passed to a cousin, the Jiajing Emperor, who ruled for 45 years. His reign started with a bitter fight, remembered as the Great Rights Controversy, over what posthumous title his own father, who had never actually been emperor, deserved. Jiajing won. But the years of court infighting it took to win seemed to have soured him permanently on dealing with his officials in person. He retreated instead into something that should sound familiar by now: immortality. He spent much of his reign deep in Taoist ritual and alchemy, delegating the actual running of the empire to corrupt ministers. In 1542, that neglect nearly got him killed from inside his own bedroom, when a group of palace women attempted to strangle him in his sleep. It's a story this channel has already told in full detail elsewhere, so we won't repeat it here. What matters for this history is that he survived and changed almost nothing afterward. His successor, the short-lived Longqing Emperor, made one quiet decision in 1567 that mattered more than anything Jiajing had done in decades. He lifted the sea ban, the Haijin, that had officially restricted private maritime trade since Hongwu's reign. Chinese merchants, not the state, would now carry Chinese goods to the world. The government's navy was gone. The private trade it had once tried to control simply grew to fill the silence. After Jiajing and Longqing, the throne passed in 1572 to a 9-year-old boy who would become the longest reigning emperor in Ming history, Wanli. For the first decade, the empire was actually in extremely capable hands, just not his. His regent, Grand Secretary Zhang Zheng, ran the empire with real discipline. He overhauled the tax system, consolidating dozens of separate levies into a single silver payment known as the Single Whip Reform, and refilled a treasury that decades of corruption had drained nearly dry. Then Zhang Zheng died in 1582, and Wanli, now an adult, learned that the disciplined minister who had lectured him constantly about frugality had privately amassed a considerable personal fortune. Furious at the hypocrisy, Wanli stripped Zhang of his posthumous honors and had his family's property confiscated. It's the moment historians usually point to as the beginning of Wanli's slow withdrawal from his own government. That withdrawal became a full-blown crisis when Wanli tried to name his favorite concubine's son as heir instead of his official eldest son, and the court bureaucracy refused to let it happen. The paranoia it left behind outlasted the argument itself. In 1615, years after the succession was finally settled, a stranger armed with a wooden club broke into the crown prince's residence and attacked the guards before being caught. Nobody ever proved who had sent him, or whether the rival consort's faction was really behind it. But the incident, remembered as the case of the wooden staff, showed just how deep the mistrust from that fight still ran. The fight over the succession dragged on for over a decade. Wanli lost, and his response was extraordinary. He simply stopped holding court. For the final 20-plus years of his reign, he refused to meet his own officials in person, leaving thousands of government positions permanently unfilled out of sheer spite. Picture what that actually meant on the ground. Court cases piled up for years. Provincial administrators died and were never replaced. An empire of over 100 million people was for 2 decades functionally running itself because the one man with the authority to make it work refused to show up. And here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Even absent from his own court, Wanli's government somehow fought and won 3 enormously expensive wars within a single decade, remembered afterward as the 3 Great Campaigns. First, crushing a Mongol-descended commander's rebellion at Ningxia in 1592. Then, suppressing a tribal chieftain's revolt in the mountains of Bozhu in the southwest. And between those two, the largest campaign of all. Between 1592 and 1598, Ming forces intervened in Korea to repel a massive Japanese invasion under Toyotomi Hideyoshi. All 3 campaigns succeeded. All 3 also drained what was left of the treasury Zhang Zheng had so carefully rebuilt, right as the emperor, who should have been managing that spending, had stopped showing up to manage anything at all. Wanli died in 1620, His successor lasted a single month before dying under suspicious circumstances, a scandal remembered as the case of the Red Pill. Next came the Yongle Emperor, a teenager with almost no interest in ruling and a genuine passion for carpentry, who spent his reign building furniture while a eunuch ran the country for him. That eunuch's name was Wei Zhongxian, and by the mid-1620s, he effectively was the Ming government. He built a personal cult, had temples erected in his own honor while still alive, and used the secret police apparatus Hongwu had created 2 centuries earlier to crush anyone who challenged him. His main targets were the reformist officials of the Donglin Academy, who had spent years criticizing court corruption. Wei had them arrested, tortured, and in several documented cases, killed. The empire's most capable and outspoken administrators were being systematically removed at the exact moment the dynasty needed them most. When Tianqi died in 1627 without an heir, his younger brother took the throne as the Yongle Emperor. His first major act was purging Wei Zhongxian's faction entirely. Wei was stripped of power and hanged himself before he could be formally executed. For a moment, it looked like the dynasty might actually recover. It didn't get the chance. Yongle inherited an empire in the grip of what modern climate scientists now call the Little Ice Age, a decades-long global cooling event that devastated harvests across northern China throughout the 1630s and early 1640s. Crops failed, famine spread, and an empty treasury had nothing left to send. Out of that desperation rose a former postal courier named Li Zicheng, who built a peasant rebel army that grew from a small band of the starving and dispossessed into a force capable of challenging the entire Ming state. He wasn't fighting alone, either. A second rebel leader, Zhang Xianzhong, was carving his own path of destruction through Sichuan at the same time, so brutally that entire regions of the province were left effectively depopulated. By the early 1640s, the Ming state was fighting a 2-front civil war against its own starving population, on top of everything else. Yongle, meanwhile, faced a third, even more dangerous threat from the northeast, where the Manchu people had unified under a rising power that would soon call itself the Qing. And here, the emperor made the single worst decision of his 17-year reign. His most capable frontier commander, a general named Yuan Chonghuan, had spent years successfully holding the northern defenses against the Manchu. The Manchu leadership understood exactly how dangerous he was, and they didn't try to beat him in battle. They tricked the emperor into destroying him instead. Manchu agents staged a deliberate deception, letting a captured Ming eunuch overhear fabricated conversations suggesting Yuan Chonghuan was secretly colluding with the enemy. The eunuch escaped, reported it, and the paranoid emperor believed him instantly. In 1630, Yuan Chonghuan was arrested, tried on the fabricated treason charges, and executed by slow slicing in the streets of Beijing, a punishment reserved for the most severe crimes against the state. The empire's best defense against the Manchu had been dismantled by its own emperor. The consequences arrived quickly. Li Zicheng's rebel army, swollen with recruits from famine-stricken provinces, marched on Beijing in the spring of 1644. The capital's defenses, already hollowed out by years of financial collapse, barely resisted. On April 25th, the rebels breached the walls. Emperor Chongzhen climbed a small hill just behind the Forbidden City, called Coal Hill. According to court records, he reportedly killed his own daughter with a sword to spare her from capture, then wrote a final message blaming his ministers for the empire's collapse, and hanged himself from a tree, Badi. The last Ming emperor to rule from Beijing died alone on a hill overlooking the palace his ancestors had spent 2.5 centuries building. 276 years of dynasty ended not in a great battle, but in a single desperate private act. The final twist belongs to a general named Wu Sangui, who commanded the critical frontier fortress at Shanhai Pass, the gateway through the Great Wall separating China from Manchu territory. With Beijing fallen to Li Zicheng's rebels, Wu faced an impossible choice. Rather than submit to the rebel army that had destroyed his emperor, Wu Sangui opened the gate to the Manchu forces waiting on the other side and asked for their help retaking the capital. They agreed, and once inside, they never really left. What followed in the south is remembered as the Southern Ming, and it is a story of one loyalist court after another, collapsing faster than the last. First, a prince crowned at Nanjing, captured within a year. Then another proclaimed further south, also crushed. The dynasty kept naming new emperors, even as it had less and less empire left to give them. The last claimant, the Yongle Emperor, fled all the way into Burma with a shrinking retinue of loyalists. In 1662, Burmese authorities handed him over to advancing Qing forces. He was executed by strangulation on the personal order of the same general who had opened the gate at Shanhai Pass 18 years earlier. Wu Sangui ended the dynasty he had once tried to save. One Ming loyalist held out longer than any court. The naval commander Zheng He, better known in the West as Koxinga, drove Dutch colonial forces off the island of Taiwan in 1662 and established the last independent Ming loyalist stronghold on Chinese soil. He died of illness the same year. His successors held the island for another 2 decades, until Qing forces finally took it in 1683. So, what actually survives from all of this? The Forbidden City still stands, largely intact, in the middle of modern Beijing, one of the largest palace complexes ever built by any civilization on Earth. The brick and stone sections of the Great Wall that most tourists photograph today are almost entirely Ming construction, not the earlier rammed earth walls of Qin. The population tells its own story. China had roughly 60 million people when Hongwu founded the dynasty. By its final decades, most estimates put the number well over 150 million, an extraordinary rate of growth for the pre-modern world, driven by exactly the kind of stable agricultural administration Hongwu had built from a beggar's understanding of what hunger actually costs a country. The civil examination system Hongwu restored also outlived him by centuries, becoming even more deeply embedded in Chinese society under the dynasties that followed. It would remain the primary path into government service in China for another 500 years, only finally abolished in 1905. Ming printing culture gave the world some of Chinese literature's most enduring works. journey to the west followed a mischievous monkey king escorting a monk to India in search of sacred scriptures. Water Margin told the story of 108 outlaws banding together against a corrupt government. Both reached their classic printed forms during this period, thanks to a publishing industry unlike anything that had existed before it. And Ming blue and white porcelain became one of the most valuable traded commodities on Earth, shipped by the ton to European courts who paid staggering sums for it, and who, centuries later, are still trying to imitate the glaze. But the real legacy of the Ming Dynasty might be the question it left unanswered. This was an empire that built the largest wooden ships in human history, mapped the coast of Africa decades before Europe did, and then simply chose to stop. Historians still argue about exactly why. Confucian officials had never liked that the voyages were run by eunuchs rather than the regular bureaucracy, and resented the cost. The renewed Mongol threat on the northern border pulled money and attention back toward land defense. And without an emperor as personally ambitious as Yongle pushing for it, nobody with real power had a reason to keep the fleets afloat. Less than a century after that decision, European ships followed the same ocean routes going the other direction, and the balance of world power never really tipped back. That is the entire history of the Ming Dynasty. A beggar monk's empire that built the most magnificent palace on earth, sailed further than anyone else alive, and then, through eunuch power struggles, absent emperors, and one catastrophic decision after another, let it all collapse from the inside. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for sticking with me through 276 years of Chinese history. If you learned something, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe if you want more full dynasty histories like this one. And drop a comment telling me if you want the Qing Dynasty next, the empire that replaced the Ming and became the largest China has ever been. I'll see you in the next video.